Hello, my name is Abby and I'm an application engineer here at DesignPoint. In this video I'm going to be talking about some of the best practices that we can use while being an admin in PDM. So here's an overview of what I'm going to be reviewing. I'm going to go over some permissions within profiles, some recommended settings within PDM, as well as some tips and tricks within our workflows. So when we first create a vault, you want to make sure that you're happy with the name you're giving it. And that's because once you create it, you're not able to rename it after that. Additionally, we want to make sure that we don't have any spaces within our vault name, and that's because, as you can see in the photo, I have this space within my vault name, and then when I take a look at that in the database, it adds that extra SOLIDWORKS PDM in front of the vault name. So then it messes with the alphabetized order that I have in my database names. So if you do want to add a space, just make sure that you're representing that with an underscore. So when we create a vault, it's going to automatically add a system administrator profile, and we want to leave that alone. You don't want to change any of the permissions or settings, and you want to make sure that you don't include this user in any of your groups, because then that would also change the permissions of that profile. You also want to make sure that no one logs in as this profile account. If you do want to have other separate admin users, make sure you create those separately as shown in the photo and assign those to a separate administrator group. So when we are assigning permissions, we want to make sure to assign them at a group level rather than at a user level, and that's because we want to make sure that everybody in the group has same access to everything across the board. It's pertinent for troubleshooting issues down the road. So we also want to make sure that admins are the only ones that have access to destroy and roll back. And that's because these two actions are permanent, they cannot be undone, and once they are done, data is lost. So you want to make sure only admins have access to that. When you're creating a new user in an existing group, you want to make sure to copy permissions from that group. And that's to be sure that you don't forget to check a certain checkbox or change a certain setting. It'll just copy everything from that existing group and you don't have to worry about it. And lastly, with users, we want to require a version comment from them. And this is helpful when we look back at the history of a file, we can see the comments that they've entered. So if you're ever not sure of what a permission does when you're looking in the PDM admin tool, there's two ways that we can find out what it does. The first one is within the admin permissions tab. If you hover over the content, it'll give you a tooltip that explains what the permission does. And in all the other tabs, there's a question mark icon at the top right corner of your screen that you can click. So I'll just review those quickly. I'll come into my PDM admin tool and I'll take a look at one of my groups. So within the administrative permissions, if you hover over something, it'll give you that tooltip that explains it. If I'm in another tab, this question mark up here is what I was referring to. I can click on that and then click on one of the permissions and it'll give me that tooltip as well. Let's jump back into the slideshow. Alright, so within PDM we have some recommended settings that we suggest. Within the group level settings, in Explorer settings, we suggest turning on automatically delete local read-only files not in Vault. So essentially this prevents your cache from building up, and when your cache builds up, then your performance will get slower and so on. So for example, let's say another user deletes a file within the Vault. That will temporarily be stored on your Vault view as a local cache file. But what this setting does is it automatically deletes that so that that doesn't build up over time. So moving on to reference dialog settings, we typically recommend turning off these two settings listed. The first one being select child references during state change. So if that were left on, anytime you went into the Vault and changed the state of a file, it would automatically try to change the state of all of the reference files. So in order to turn that function off, you can come into the reference dialog settings. The other one being it would automatically change the state of any drawings associated with that file. So we also recommend turning that off so that you don't mistakenly change the state of a file that you didn't mean to. So moving on to workflows, we are able to change the group permissions within the workflow just as long as you save. And that's a key thing within workflows. None of your changes are going to take place unless you hit that save button in the top left corner of the window. So when we're naming our transitions and our states, we want to make sure that we don't use the same name 2 times or 3 times, because then it can get confusing as you're working in your vault. We also typically recommend that when we're naming our transitions, we want to name them as send to the next state name. So I'll show you what I mean. So on the left, I have the typical workflow. This is the default one that comes in there. And what I did was I renamed all of the transitions to send to next state name. So that makes it pretty clear what you're going to do when you're working in the vault. And just in general, you want to make any major changes to a test vault before doing them to a production vault to avoid any issues. And of course, if you have any issues or any questions, if you're on subscription with us, tech support is included, so you can give us a call at that number and we'd be happy to help you. I hope you found something helpful in this video, and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.